The other astrological events that coincide with potential for ever deepening this journey is where we can start to talk about the real Shiva Shakti relationship that many of you are familiar in tantric philosophy practices, outlooks. And to a certain extent, Jupiter and Juno coming together are in itself a very powerful kind of combination. And as energies of grace, they're very, very opening. But the journey towards the creation of the inner marriage is like any authentic kind of healing or spiritual journey. It's not just a journey of light and love. It's also a journey down. If you like, into the lower chakras, into the bowels of our being, into the mysteries of the deep sacred feminine and her relationship with corresponding deep sacred masculine. And in astrology's language, this is where we can draw from what the asteroids bring to our astrology charts. When, for instance, the planet Pluto meets with the Persephone asteroid, we have a very deep, powerful, kind of Shiva-Kali-like union happening within ourselves. Whenever the Shiva asteroid meets with any of the so-called dark goddesses, whether Black Moon, Medusa, Lilith, Hecate, similarly, an incredibly deep meeting of Shiva and Shakti. And Shakti is a great term. It's one of those words that sounds like it means. On one level, Shakti is a generic term that describes spiritual power. More specifically, it describes the sacred power of the deep feminine, of the goddess, of Kundalini, and her awakening within each of us. And there are various Shakti goddesses in Hindu mythology which parallel the different layers that we're talking about in astrology. Other examples of this masculine-feminine unity that I would add to this mix are Chiron, the wounded healer, with Hygeia, the Kundalini goddess of healing. Surprisingly for some of you, Saturn in conjunction with Hecate, the wise ancient old man inside us who meets the queen of the witches, the medicine woman. Two very powerful, very ancient forces. Them meeting, as we found in one of our camel treks in recent years, a very potent kind of tantric relationship in itself. And also Pluto and the Black Moon. The Black Moon is one of those mysterious figures that embodies Kali and Durga, embodies the Black Madonna, embodies Black Tara, the dark face of the Great Mother. These are even deeper meetings. And when these kind of lineups happen, they take us so deeply within ourselves. And this is in some ways where the real work is. Like the upper chakra openings are easy. You know, Eros and Psyche meeting is just glorious. But when we going deeper into this layer, we by necessity have to go into these deeper, more primal layers. And this is where the real work starts to happen. Because when you have these kind of lineups, while it opens our hearts and often coincides with major kind of spontaneous tantric awakenings, it also dredges up a lot of very ancient unresolved material, some which is personal to us, some which we carry from our parents' marriage, from ancestral, transgenerational influences within our families. So, like the true healing journey, it's like there's no messing around with this, but the potential fruits of going ever deeper in this particular process for our own well-being, and yet for our potential for soul-to-soul based relationships in the outer world increases exponentially. And to a certain extent, whatever our gender, we have to do the work internally on both the wounded and distorted faces of the dark feminine within us and the wounded and wounding aspects of the sacred masculine inside us, equally distorted. And this is where it's much more challenging territory for us to go into, but absolutely necessary. And when you get these kind of astrological alignments, so you get simultaneously the extraordinary openings, but also incredibly deep cathartic upwellings of energy that needs to be released. And if we're serious about preparing ourselves for that ideal of soul-to-soul relationships, we have to prepare the ground inside ourselves. Because if we don't do that deeper inner work, even when the perfect partner walks past us, we will miss them or we'll sabotage. Now there's a great episode in the myth of Eros and Psyche that really illuminates this. And some of you might remember it. It's when Eros and Psyche, who are one of the great romantic, ecstatic kind of couples in mythology and astrology, when they meet, there is this initial experience of the sacred marriage. And it's embodied by the fact that the human psyche gets transported into this beautiful kind of castle where this lover appears to her every night. And she is in a state of continuous bliss and ecstasy. And yet the deal is, she is not allowed to see her lover in the form of Eros. He does not want her to see. All he wants her to experience is her glorious projections on who is this being who comes every night into her world. But eventually, because consciousness demands that we expand, she is pushed to find out. And this is where the famous episode happens, is that after another glorious bout of lovemaking, she lights a candle. And to her shock and horror and amazement, there is the God of love in her bed. And she's so shocked by it that she spills hot wax on his body. He wakes up and flees. And all this beautiful experience, this life that she's living, kind of disappears into the ether, and she finds herself totally abandoned and away from this castle that was her home. Now, psychologically and spiritually, this is an incredibly important event because it shows something about our journey, the journey that we have to go to really embody the sacred marriage. Because at that stage in their relationship, he was just happy for her to have her glorious projections onto him. He didn't really want to be seen for who he is. And this is a place that happens for a lot of us when we first meet the possibility of pure and unconditional love. It freaks us out, or it freaks a lot of people out. Because there's an intuition that if you're going to stay in this connection, if you're going to stay close to this being, and particularly if the other person is either opening his or her own psyche and eros, or it's happening simultaneously within yourself, the intuition is your entire life is going to change. And you have to be ready for that. In the myth, eros, like unfortunately a lot of men who are caught and stuck in eros type masculinity, bolt because they're too immature. They're not ready. They haven't done the necessary inner work to be able to stay with that kind of alchemical power to transform their lives. So it's often a stage we all go through in our relationships. And it's like that notion that you hear, some of you will have heard, like love brings up its opposite. The bigger the heart openings, in some ways, the deeper the shit arises. You have to expect it. It's par for the course. And it's what we do with that deeper stuff which actually makes the difference as to how successful the relationship turns out. And we're not here talking about the survival of an individual relationship. When we're talking about success here, it's success whether the relationship fails or not. Because the success is how much you open your own heart, how much you flush out the distortions in your own system that block your capacity for intimacy on every level. So when we're talking about success, we're talking about that. And so even the most challenging relationship scenarios can be seen as a vehicle for getting you to where you need to get.